Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. Every month here is pretty busy, but October is especially. So we've started the new school year. September is in the rear view. We have tons of live events coming your way this month, including all of our space exploration month is here, connecting with astronauts and scientists and engineers from Canada, the US, and all over the world who are sharing their stories of space exploration. We have our Wild Hope series connecting with some really cool conservationists. We've got virtual field trips, like later this month, we'll be hanging out with elephant seals off the coast of California. So lots going on. Visit exploringbytheseat.com where you can find what we have coming up and register for the lessons. We're also doing a little bit for a special Science Literacy Week. So a little series showcasing amazing scientists in our federal government. And we just happen to have one of those hanging out backstage with us. We've got Emma Pascoe with us. She's a biologist with Environment and Climate Change Canada. She explores how Canada works to save our amazing wildlife coast to coast through the Species at Risk Act. So I'm going to bring Emma in with us now. Here we go. Hey, Emma, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good, good. It's great to have you hanging out with us today.
Yeah, great to be here.
Yeah, I don't think there's any students out here who don't love our Canadian wildlife. So I think we're looking forward to exploring that a little bit. I do want to give a quick shout out to the classrooms who are joining us. Don't be shy to use that chat sidebar. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Of course, use it for your questions in a little bit. But Emma, I'm going to give you the floor for a bit and let's do a little learning.
Okay, amazing. I am going to share my screen.
All right. So far, so good. I see it loading backstage. All right. Perfect.
How are we doing?
Looks good, Emma.
Amazing. Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm excited to do this presentation for you. I'm here from Environment and Climate Change Canada. I'm talking to you guys now from our Place Vincent-Massey office in Gatineau, Quebec, which is on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. I've ducked into a little meeting room to give you a bit of a sneak peek into what we do here at Environment and Climate Change Canada to protect species at risk. So there's a little intro slide. I've got a picture of me. I've got a picture of some of my favorite ecosystems that I've lived in. I've lived all over Canada, Toronto, British Columbia. Now I live in Ottawa. And it's really great to have experienced so much of Canada's beautiful wildlife and species and ecosystems, which is what our presentation is going to be about. So I'm going to start out by getting some definitions for you for what do I mean when I say a species at risk, and an ecosystem. So the easiest way for me to explain what is a species at risk is to ask you, what are the differences? Well, what is the one main difference between these two pictures? And if you're watching from a classroom, I can give you a sec to shout it out to your teacher or something. What's different between these two pictures? Okay, if you said one of these animals isn't here anymore, you would be exactly where I'm trying to get at. You know, I know technically also the difference could be what one of them's made out of feathers and one of them is made out of metal. But essentially what I'm trying to get at is that dinosaurs aren't here anymore. They went extinct a long, long time ago for reasons that had nothing to do with humans, because humans weren't even around that many millions of years ago. But the idea is the same. When we're talking about species at risk, the risk is that they might go extinct and not be here anymore. And these days, the answer usually has something to do with humans. Okay, so that's a species and a species at risk. What is an ecosystem? An ecosystem is the word that scientists use for all the different living and non-living things in an area being together. So I've got this picture from near my house. It's one of my favorite spots to take a walk. That's the Ottawa River. We've got some trees. There's a duck in the background, leaves, rocks, dead branches, some other plants, and all of these different living and non-living things, and in particular the species, play a part in making this ecosystem healthy and just making it a beautiful place for us to take a walk. So that's kind of the main message that I'm going to keep coming back to, is that all species play a part in making an ecosystem. Okay, so I've given you some definitions. Now I want to introduce you to some celebrities. So take a second, think in your head. If you were to think about a famous species in Canada, a famous animal or plant, and one that you might have heard a lot about it being at risk, who do you first think of? You can shout it out to your teachers if you're in a classroom. So the first one I'm going to share with you is our polar bear. That's probably the most famous example of a species that's at risk. And in Canada, we've designated them as special concern species, which means we're a little bit worried about them. They're big, they're beautiful, they're fluffy. I used to hang out with the ones in the Toronto Zoo when I was a little kid. I just love polar bears. And their main reason that they're at risk is because of the warming that's affecting our Arctic in Canada. There's ad campaigns about them. You see them in, Coca-Cola posters. They're everywhere. So I consider them to be one of our kind of our big celebrity species at risk. Another one that I would call a celebrity are our orcas. So if anybody's joining in from the West Coast, say hello to any orcas you see from me. I used to live in Victoria. And they're another example of a pretty famous, lots of people know about them and think about them. They're at risk for a lot of reasons. Their food sources are declining. They're really affected by human activity, like loud boats and everything. So that's another really common one. These other examples I've put up, not necessarily because they're the most common, although I think a lot of people hear about monarch butterflies. We know how beautiful they are. There's stories about them. I put this owl up there because it's my personal favorite because I think he's so cute. That's a northern saw-whet owl. I think they look like flying teddy bears. It's really easy as a species at risk biologist, when I tell people about my job, to say, oh, I'm worried about these species being at risk, and show somebody some of these pictures, and everybody goes, oh my God, oh, it's cute, they're beautiful. But my job extends not just to the species that are fluffy and colorful and magnificent. All species play a part in the ecosystem, right? So I now want to introduce you guys to some of our less favorite celebrities who are at risk in Canada. The first one's going to be some snakes. So if you're not a fan of snakes, this is your warning to close your eyes. I'm a fan of snakes. Here's a couple that we have here. The eastern fox snake and the eastern hognose snake. Those are on our list of species that are at risk. I think snakes are pretty cool. They eat a lot of the creatures that we would consider pests, like mice, rats. And you might think of them as kind of scary and slimy from Hollywood movies, but they're actually not slimy at all, the ones who are on land. They feel sort of more kind of shiny because of their scales. And they have, behaviors that I would also consider pretty cute, which is that they make their own little areas to curl up in and get cozy called hibernacula. So it's not quite a nest like a bird would, but if you think about birds, laying their young in a nest, snakes do the same thing with their hibernaculas, and they can survive cold temperatures there. And they're really fascinating, and they're definitely important to our ecosystems. Now I've got some birds here that aren't necessarily, as fluffy and cute as my saw-whet owl, but I think they're pretty fantastic. These are a couple of woodpeckers. And when you think of woodpeckers, you think of that sound that they make, when they're boring a hole into a tree. But not some woodpeckers, like these ones here, have different techniques than just digging a hole into a tree and pulling out the bugs that they find there. So red-headed woodpeckers do something called fly catching, which is where they're actually able to jump and snatch a bug like right out of midair, which is, a skill that right now the Toronto Blue Jays are displaying very impressively. I'm a Toronto native at heart. Go Blue Jays. And Williamson sapsuckers do something that I actually think compares them almost to like human engineers. So they choose trees that are very sticky with sap, and the sap comes out, and rather than waiting for a bug to crawl out of the tree, they wait for bugs to get stuck to the sap, and then they go ahead and eat those, which is just, it's pretty ingenious if you ask me. Now, we don't just have animals on our Species at Risk Act list. We also have plants, and we even have these guys, mosses and lichens. So lichens are really cool. They're a combination of a plant cell and a fungal cell, so fungus like a mushroom, like, not quite the ones you'd put on your pizza. And they work together to create sort of one living body that you find all over rocks in the forest. And they're really interesting because they're very sensitive to the conditions of the environment. So if there's like a specific type of pollution, they'll react in a certain way. And so they can kind of be an indicator for us. They can tell us more about what's happening in our environment, it's pretty amazing. So I've introduced you to some of our famous celebrities, our less famous celebrities, and got another picture of a place that I've been in Canada. I loved hiking in Banff. We've got an alpine forest ecosystem here. And it's just a further reminder that all of these species that I'm telling you about play an important part in our ecosystem. So what can we do about it? I've given you a problem. And now I'm going to tell you how me and my coworkers in my building and how you guys might be able to work to help us solve it. So in Canada, we have a law. It's called the Species at Risk Act. We call it SARA for short. We do have some people working with us whose names are Sarah. So if your name is Sarah today, you can feel a little bit special that you share your name with an act that helps keep our wildlife safe. And it's a law, and it means that if people break it and hurt a species that's at risk, they can get in trouble. So it's really useful to have this because then we can tell people, hey, it's not just, hurting feelings if you're doing something that is going to hurt one of these species at risk. It's actually breaking the law. And my job at Environment and Climate Change Canada is I'm a species at risk biologist, and I help implement the different parts of the law. So the law just doesn't just say, if you hurt a species, you get in trouble. It also, the Act doesn't just say that. The Act also says that when a species gets added to our list of species at risk, somebody has to write a report about it. Why is it at risk? What's our objective? What's our goal to get it recovered? Is there any habitat that we need to protect to help us get there? What other actions and strategies can we take? And how can we be sure that we're on track? So while I wish I spent a little bit more of my time in the outdoors, you can usually find me. This was my desk setup the first time I did this presentation during the COVID lockdown era. Now I'm here in my office building, but it's the same sort of work. I've got a lot of emails and a lot of spreadsheets, but I also edit recovery documents that are written by experts all over the country. I don't have my trusty companion Bernard with me when I'm at the office. He's waiting for me at home. But essentially our job is to make sure that these recovery documents cover all that information that I just described to help us recover our species at risk. So here are some of the different things that we do when we're working to recover them. So one of the main things, one of the first things actually that gets done is that we think about why did it come at risk in the first place. So I've got some examples for you here. Logging and wood harvesting is the name of one of our threat categories. That happens when, what would happen when a species is at risk because of logging and wood harvesting is that its habitat, the place that it lives, is no longer there. So species that rely on trees and forests, if there's too much of this going on, they're not going to be able to have a home. We also look at species that have become at risk. Maybe their home is still there, but there's something in it that's making them sick. So sewage dumps, pollution, they're still there in that river, but that river looks super disgusting. I wouldn't want to swim there. And none of the fish who are there like it very much either. Another interesting threat that we think about is invasive species. So sometimes a species in an ecosystem are all working together just fine, and then a new one comes in. So you might have heard of, this happens a lot with fish and mussels, zebra mussels that come in from outside of Canada, or there are bugs and beetles that do this. And because they're not used to the ecosystem, and because, bugs and fish and mussels don't have listening ears like we do, and they can't listen to what they're, they can't listen to what the people who already live there are asking of them. They just start eating and eating and eating the way that they would back in wherever they came from. And they have no natural predators. And so it ends up taking over the ecosystem. So, I mean, our first step would be, getting all of these guys to speak the same language and be friends. But since we can't do that, we consider them invasive species because they're not people like us, and they cause a real problem. So now that we've found out what some of those threats are, the next thing we do is think about how can we remove them. So I've got some pictures of some things that we do here. Of course, we're always checking up on the animals to see if they're healthy, if there's a disease. That's one of the threats I didn't quite touch on. We can work on that. Our wood bison, I don't have a picture of them, but they're out in the prairies. And one of their main threats is a virus that only they can get. And they're actually working on vaccines so that hopefully they can get taken care of just like we got taken care of with our COVID shots. Another thing that we do is have national parks. If any of you have gotten a chance to visit some of our national parks, it's just awesome. And there are rules in national parks that say that we can't do any developing like logging, or we can't make any pollution with sewage. And that helps the ecosystems there continue to just kind of thrive just as they are. And we connect them too is another cool thing, is that something we found out in conservation science is that these critters do better when they're able to move from one area to another. And so having these paths, sort of like we have with our roads, that are made of the same type of ecosystem that they're used to, that they can follow, is something that really helps. And we can go and remove the invasive species wherever possible. So this is a picture of a plant called Phragmites. It's a real problem in Southern Ontario. And some of our strategies is to just continually be digging these plants up and tossing them out, digging them up, composting them, digging them up. And then they can't affect the ecosystem as much as they were. We also have to keep track of how the ecosystem is doing once we've done these things, which is my favorite part. So that's me. I got to volunteer to help put little bracelets on birds. It's called bird banding. And then it helps us see where they go. And then when they come back, we can note down their bracelet number and keep track of how far they went. It's pretty awesome. This is my coworker, Lee. He's counting all the number of different types of plants using a special square ruler called a quadrat. Something really important for the health of an ecosystem is how many different species there are in it. So if you've heard the term biodiversity before, that's what we're looking for. We're looking for tons of different types of plants, all using different parts of the soil and different amounts of rain and everything, and that makes for a really healthy ecosystem. And then finally, here are two of my coworkers holding turtles. I didn't get to go that day. I was very jealous, but there are a bunch of turtles on our at-risk list, and they're really fun to play with. So I've told you about what me and my coworkers do. And now I want to tell you some things that you can do, because guess what? You are also a species in an ecosystem. So you can learn more about the species that interest you. We have what's called the Species at Risk Registry. It's a website. This is where all of our reports are stored. It's not as fun maybe as a book that you would get out from the library. So what I would really encourage you guys to do is to go to your local libraries and find their nature sections. And you can learn all these amazing facts, like more about the ones that I've just told you about. And it's so much fun. And the more interested you get, the easier it is for you to be able to help these species. You can join community science events. So there's a website here. You can Google Citizen Science Portal. And it gives you a list of projects that are going on near you. So it's not just, grown-up biologists who can do this survey work. A lot of the time, kids can help also. So there's, these guys here are helping out with, looks like they're doing a water quality survey. And it's so much fun. And you get to be outside and you get to see cool critters. And so that's something that's an option for anybody who wants to look one of those up. If you aren't able to find any community science events in your neighborhood, you can also just take a walk with your phone or with your parents' phone. So there's a couple of amazing apps. The one I have written here is called iNaturalist, but there's also one called Seek, S-E-E-K, like as in seek, you're looking for something. And basically what you do is you take pictures of the species that you find. So that's a wood duck that was in my neighborhood. At first glance, you see kind of the green head and you go, okay, it's a mallard. I've seen 100 of those. But then you look a little closer and it's got all these other incredible markings on it. They're really interesting. And so I took a picture and I uploaded it to this website. And scientists actually use these sightings, because we can't be everywhere at once, to know where all of these different these creatures are. So there are some specific ones for birds. Merlin is specific for birds. There's a butterfly one actually that actually gets used to track monarch butterfly migrations. So if you're out for a walk and you or your parent has a phone, or you're grown up, you can take pictures of what you see and it'll help scientists in real time almost. And finally, any small everyday actions that make the environment a more healthy place are things that help species at risk. So making sure to recycle, making sure that when you go grocery shopping with your grown-ups, you've got some cloth bags rather than too many plastic ones. If you have a cat, keeping them inside is a big one. This is my family cat, my brother's cat. Her name is Cat. And she's only allowed outside with a leash so that she doesn't hurt any birds. Because studies have shown that the number of cats who catch and eat birds, you might think, it's just one, it doesn't make a difference. But they've noticed that it's actually adding up. So having your cat be inside or on a leash where you can watch them, or with a bell, is something that actually really helps our birds. So I'll leave you with this. This is one of my favorite ecosystems in Canada. This is out east in New Brunswick. I love the ocean. I think it's mysterious and exciting because you can't see, right what's underneath right away. And I hope this presentation did some of that for you, peeled back a little bit of the mystery of our species at risk in Canada and how we can help them. Thank you so much for having me come join you here, and I've got time for questions.
Okay. All right, Emma, thank you so much for that great presentation. Lots of cool animal species in Canada. It is a bummer to hear about so many of them being at risk, but it's also great to hear about people like you and your colleagues who are doing something about it, as well as giving us tips that we can use at home to play our part. Okay, well, let's see if there's any classrooms out there in the mood to play some Kahoot. So while you were presenting,
Fun.
I pulled together a quick Kahoot quiz, and why not? Let's play our Kahoot quiz. So I'm going to share my screen here. It's just going to take a second to come up, and then it's going to have instructions for how you can come in and join us. Don't worry if you can't join with your tech today. You can still play along and see how well you do with your answers. My screen is sharing. Oops, that's the invite button. Let's try this one. There we go. You should be able to see it now. We are going to go to a website called Kahoot. So the website is kahoot.it. Once you get there, it's going to ask you for a PIN number. And today's PIN number is 886-1813. So if you're able to join from your classroom, you can follow kahoot.it and then put in today's PIN number, 886-1813. If not, this should be at the front of your classroom anyway, so you can shout out your answers to your teacher and see how well you do as a classroom. If you are tuning in from home, you can use that QR code, give it a scan, and it will bring you into the Kahoot. So we'll wait to see if any classrooms will physically join us for the Kahoot. We will check for some questions in the chat. So if you are tuning in, don't be shy, use the chat and let us know where you're tuning in from. And the first question I have today, Emma, is how long have you been working to protect endangered species?
Ooh, good question. So I've been working for Environment and Climate Change Canada for almost 7 years, 6.5 now. It's been about 5.5 years in this particular job where I work on the recovery documents, but I started out also in the same group, and we have different regional offices all over the country. So there's 6 of them: Atlantic, Quebec, Ontario, Prairie, Pacific, and Northern. And I was on a team that helped coordinate the work that all those biologists were doing. And then before that, I was living in Victoria. I did a master's degree studying herring fish, which are the main food for salmon, and salmon in turn are the main food for orcas. And I was studying how healthy they are. So, I mean, it's been a long time, I guess, that I've been doing some kind of work for species at risk. And it's, you're right that sometimes it's a bummer at how much they're at risk, but it's really exciting. I've spent some time outside, I've spent some time inside, but all of it's learning about my favorite subject. So that's pretty great.
Okay, let's squeeze in one more. Emma, what are some important tools that you use for your job?
That's a great question. So I mostly do report editing. So I use a lot of Microsoft tools on my computer. But my coworkers who are doing the ones who actually go collect the data use a bunch of different outdoor tools. So I showed you the square ruler that my coworker Lee was using to count all those plants. That's a special one. When I got to help volunteer to put the little bracelets on the birds, they're called mist nets, and it looks like a volleyball net, but it's even more fine mesh, and it has pockets. And we put them up right at dawn. So if you do this volunteering, you have to wake up before the sun. So I usually only do it in April and May, because by the time June comes around, I have to wake up at 2:30 in the morning to drive out to the site, and it's just too much. But at dawn, the birds can't really see the nets very well. And so they fly into them, they get stuck, and then we walk around every few minutes, and we go and we help take them out of their little nets, and then we bring them to the little wooden hut that serves as our lab. And we weigh them and we figure out what species they are, and we give them that little bracelet that I was talking about.
Yep.
And then we let them go fly off. So that's slightly more fun tools than a laptop that species at risk biologists use to help them do this work.
All right. Well, looks like we have some players, so let's get our Kahoot started. I am going to hit the start. It's going to count us in. There's multiple choice. There's true and false. The quicker you put in the right answer, the more points you're going to get. So here we go. We have a nice warm-up question for you. Where is Emma joining us from today? Was it Ontario, British Columbia, Quebec, or Alberta? So where is Emma joining us from today? You've got about 10 more seconds to get your answer locked in.
It's actually tricky because I mentioned all of those in the presentation.
You did. All right. Most of our crew went with Ontario because I think you said that you live in Ontario, but I believe your office is in Quebec.
I am. I'm in Gatineau, Quebec. I'm right across the river. It takes about half an hour to drive there from my suburban neighborhood in Ottawa. But I did mention all of those different places in the presentation, and I think I snuck in some New Brunswick at the end. So there's a lot of Canada to explore and a lot to protect.
All right. Well, crew, that was a bit of a sneaky question because Ottawa is right next to that part of Quebec. So some people just go across the province border to work and then come back to Ontario. All right, so that's our first question. That's going to put the fuzzy ostrich into first place. We need to go to a true or false now. All species play a part in their ecosystems. Is that true or false? That all species play a part in their ecosystems. You've got about 12 seconds to get your answer locked in. True or false? All species play a part in their ecosystems. All right, there we go. Good job, crew. That is absolutely true. Everything is doing something. Maybe you can get away with removing a couple things, and we might not see the differences as, largely, but you remove too much and the ecosystem can collapse. And then there's keystone species who, if they disappear, that brings the whole ecosystem down. All right. Next question coming our way. The blue pigeon taking that first place spot. This is a multi-select. You need to pick as many as you think fit. You need to click the species at risk in Canada. So you've got the monarch butterfly, polar bears, Canadian geese, and raccoons. You need to pick which species you think are at risk in Canada. Hint, it's more than one. Another hint is decoding for you in that photo above. So you need to click the species that are at risk in Canada. Your options are monarch butterflies, polar bears, Canadian geese, and raccoons. You need to pick more than one. All right, good job, crew. Polar bears and monarch butterflies were overwhelmingly the most chosen answers. Getting lots of movement. The epic walrus is in first place. We have our final question, true or false? SARA stands for the Species at Rest Act. What do you think? Is that true or false? SARA stands for the Species at Rest Act. So is that what it is? It's species at rest or resting species? Or is it something else? True or false? SARA stands for the Species at Rest Act. You've got a couple more seconds. All right. We tricked a few students, but some students went with false, and that's right. It is our Species at Risk Act. All right, let's take a look at our podium. In third place, we've got the rock star tapir. In second place, the powerful porcupine. And holding down that top spot, the expert tapirs. We had a few tapirs out there today, and that doesn't always happen where we see the lead change on every single question. So good job, crew. Thanks for playing along with us. I'm going to turn off that screen share, and we'll devote the rest of our time together to a little Q&A action. So I want to start out in Nova Scotia. We have a group hanging out with us. And Emma, they'd love to know what you studied when you were in college or university.
Oh, great question. So I started out my university journey. I went to Queen's University in Kingston, so not too far from my hometown of Toronto. And I did a degree there that was an environmental science and biology degree. So I studied both the sort of theory behind protecting our environment. So I learned about things like the precautionary principle, which is a sort of guideline for environmentalists that says if you don't know how an action is going to affect the environment, it's better to be precautionary. And I took biology classes like, cell biology and all of that. But I also got to do some field courses, which was pretty cool. That's where I went out to New Brunswick and I spent a week learning how to do surveys out on the coast, basically, in the intertidal zone and on boats. And I spent a few months. Queen's does an exchange program where you can go swap with another student at another university. So I actually spent some time in Australia. And I got to go to the Great Barrier Reef, which was just the coolest thing ever. And then when I finished university, I wanted to do more university. So I went out to the University of Victoria on the West Coast. And that was where I did my big thesis research project on how healthy the herring were in those years when I was living out there. And then after that, I had had enough school. So that was when I realized that a job with the government would sort of help me not just be learning about, one species and one thing for a long time, but I'd get to kind of dip my toes in a little bit of everything. And also that the work in the public service, it really impacts people's day-to-day lives, and that was important to me. So I took this job here, and now I'm here in Ottawa, and I crossed the border to Gatineau to work, which tripped a few of you up on that quiz question. That was my education journey.
All right. Great. Well, I think that's something that's really cool to, you talked about some of the field courses you took, and I think that's a great part of university is those options to take field courses and get out in the field and see cool places, study wildlife. Most universities offer those, so those are pretty cool opportunities.
Yeah, definitely recommend if you can find one at the school that you go to. And I know there are actually some high schools that offer kind of like a sneak preview of what a field course could look like a field trip for a day or something. So, and anywhere you can find those, I definitely recommend it. It's pretty awesome.
All right. Another question here in the chat asking about deer. So I believe we only have the one species of deer in Canada. So they're asking if there's any endangered deer, but maybe we can extend it to talk about more ungulates like the moose and the elk and caribou.
Absolutely.
Do we have any? Yeah.
We sure do. So our deer are doing just fine. We've got the white-tailed deer here. When I lived in Victoria, they used to come hang out in my backyard, and it was awesome. They're doing just great. Our moose, there's actually so many of them that it's starting to cause a little bit of a problem. So there are places where they're doing studies. In one of them that I've come across is in Cape Breton, where they put up kind of like a wall to keep moose out of a certain spot of Cape Breton National Park. And then they're studying what that does to the ecosystem. So there's, the kind of the opposite of endangered with moose. But Joe mentioned ungulates, so that's the class of animals that deer and moose fall into. And there's also caribou, which is, I think, where Joe was hoping I would go with this. So caribou are one of our endangered species. There are a lot of different subpopulations of caribou. We've got the Peary caribou, the Torngat Mountain ones out east. In the north, we've got boreal caribou and barren ground caribou. Out west, we have northern and southern mountain caribou. And all of those guys are on our list. A lot of it has to do with their habitats. Their habitats are shrinking because of how we're using the land. So it's partly that they don't have anywhere to live. And then it's also partly that the way that we're changing the habitats has made it so that more wolves end up living in their habitat. So it's sort of like a twofold, really complex problem. It's really hard to know how to solve it. There's a ton of scientists working on it. And we also have a lot of people involved in this recovery work in Indigenous communities across Canada. We have something called the Indigenous Guardians Program, where communities can sign up and learn how to kind of enforce SARA on their land. And we try as much as we can to do, when we write these recovery strategies, to do consultations with these communities who can tell us about their experience. I had a chance to go listen to some elders talk in person about their experience when they were young, and there were so many caribou they were able to safely eat them, and the populations were just fine, and it was part of their sacred meal. And it made me think about my family and how growing up chicken noodle soup was our sacred meal, and how I would feel if I couldn't have chicken noodle soup anymore. So listening to Indigenous people about caribou and about any of the other species that they're interested in is something really important that we do here at Environment and Climate Change Canada. We're always working to do more of it.
Yeah. You brought up a really good point, and something that makes conservation work tricky sometimes is that sometimes we change and alter environments, and then we kind of have that responsibility of trying to do something to help or try to undo some of the damage. And sometimes that means things that some people might see controversial, like culling deer or moose if there are too many in an area. But we have to think about what's going to be best for the ecosystem. And oftentimes there's too many deer because of something we did in the first place, like removing some of their predators and things like that. So it really is kind of a delicate process of trying to make conservation work and fix some of the stuff that we've done.
Yeah, something cool I can show you that's actually right here in my pocket is my work badge. I've got this little square moose hide, and it's a project. I believe I think it's called the Moose Hide Initiative or something like that, and it's a way of using, we don't want anything to go to waste. And so moose that have died, there's a group of people who make these squares out of their hides, and it's sort of a symbol of violence, gender-based violence, violence against women or children, mostly in Indigenous communities. And so they hand these out and they sell them to raise money and awareness. So that's something also really interesting that you can look up. They came and spoke to us at work, and I thought it was really moving. So I've got one of their moose hide squares on my work badge. A lot of us do actually here at in my office.
All right. Well, let's squeeze in a couple more questions. I have a few more here in the chat. When you travel to different locations or some of your colleagues for work or to study in the field, is that something that the researcher pays for, or is it covered by the government or the organization?
Oh, good question. It depends if you're doing it on your own personal time. So when I was doing the bird volunteering, that was just an organization in my city that I found about through a friend, and I emailed the organizer. So that's all me. I pay for my gas. I drive over there. Work trips are usually paid for by the company that you work for. We try and make sure that the ones that we're going on are the most important, so we can get the most bang for our buck. But yeah, so when I went to a workshop that was related to my job, then my job pays me back. But if I'm doing it on my own, and then a lot of times in university, you have to pay a tuition fee for taking the course. But sometimes if you're a graduate student and you're presenting your research somewhere, or you're doing some kind of your own personal research, the university will help you pay for it. So it depends.
Okay. So there's species in some countries that no longer, they're extinct in the wild, but there are some populations still in zoos where there's breeding programs. Are there any species in Canada that we know of that are extinct in the wild?
It's a good question. It's hard to say for sure when a species is extinct in the wild because we haven't gone and checked absolutely every area. So I don't have any off the top of my head for you guys, but I do love that zoos do that and that you get to go and see them safely. And the zoo is doing a really good job. We sometimes partner with zoos, and they'll do research on the animal to figure out how we can help it get back out in the wild. And so the Toronto Zoo, the Calgary Zoo, those are all zoos that do that sort of work where they've, we all care about the animals so much. We're trying to provide them with the best life that they can. And they'll work constantly to enrich their habitat, to give them, a better place to live that's more like home. And then they'll communicate those results with other scientists, and we can help reintroduce them in Canada. So I wish I had a list for you off the top of my head. I don't, but it's pretty amazing that we can do that.
Yeah, that's okay. It's important to highlight the good work zoos are doing. There are some zoos or places that call themselves zoos that aren't doing great work.
But, no, not a fan of those.
Yeah, there are a lot of zoos, like some that you mentioned, like the Toronto Zoo, that are doing amazing work. And in some cases, it's not just education, it is conservation. They're funding projects around the world and serving as arcs, some of them, for species we've lost in the wild. But we hope that if we can protect their ecosystems, that one day we can put them back where they belong.
Exactly.
Okay. Wildfires. We're getting, lots of wildfires in Canada. So are there some species that are really being impacted by those wildfires?
Yeah, so there definitely are. And we're really learning more about it just only in the last few years because of how many more there have been. All the species that live in forests. So the, our owls and some of the caribou, and a lot of the plants even that we have on our list. we're starting to see the numbers roll in that the wildfires are a really serious threat for them. Old growth forests, the ones that we have out in BC that have been around for more than 200 years, are really special because they can actually protect against wildfires because of how much water they store and how, it's like a rainforest, how damp they are. And also because of how the trees get their roots like so deep into the soil, they're so stable, they're able to protect everything else around them. So wildfires are a big threat to the forests that aren't quite like those. Our wildfires are starting to get extreme to the point where we're very worried about our old growth forests. But it's cool that they also kind of offer a solution to the problem. So the more of these trees that we can leave and not cut down, the more time they have to really get their roots in the soil, get huge and big, lots of leaves, and that really keeps the moisture, the water in the environment, and it makes it less likely that they're going to burn. When I lived out in BC, we would have wildfire summers. It's pretty freaky now that I'm back in Ontario and Quebec that we're having some wildfire summers. I had never experienced that growing up. So a lot of the species that live here in Quebec and Ontario aren't used to fires, and so they don't really have defenses. So that's another case where we're really seeing some troubles. The solution, there are a lot of different solutions, but I think it's really cool that old growth forests in particular kind of have their own built-in solution. They're in danger, but also because of how much water they hold and how stable they make our environment, they're able to help protect us.
Yep. All right. Well, I want to start off with a huge shout out to our classrooms. Thank you so much for the great questions you've sent in. In fact, one more just squeaked in here. Do you think writing to like your members of parliament and people like that is effective?
I think that's a great idea. The more letters that come in, the more the politicians realize that this is something that their constituents, the fancy way of saying the people who voted them into office, they realize that their constituents really care about this, and that if they want to stay in office and keep getting voted back in and reelected, they need to address the issues that their constituents care about. So yeah, writing letters to your MP is a fantastic way to help make sure that these policies stay in place, and that me and my coworkers can keep doing our job.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much for the classrooms, hanging out, sending in great questions. And Emma, thanks to you. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for sharing some of your time during Science Literacy Week. It was great to talk a little bit about our endangered species and how we're trying to protect them.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me. This is great.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We hope to see you in more events as October carries on. But for now, we're going to say goodbye, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.